Thank you, Olivier. Will you be running the presentation or it's on my side?
Andre is granting you access to the slides, so then you're normally able to move them. You have control of the screen.
Okay.
I think you have to click first at the middle of the screen, and then normally it's
okay.
yes, it works.
Okay, it seems to work. Let me check. Okay, it seems to work. So thank you again for this invitation. It's very timely for us to join this meeting to discuss the results of project and what is going on also from the point of view of academia and experts on EPCs. And I will explain you why in a moment. As introduction about myself, I'm Serena Pontoglio. I work in the unit of the European Commission in DG Energy, working on energy efficiency of buildings and products, and in particular, I'm working on buildings policy and renovation wave implementation. I joined this team in December, but before I was working more broadly on energy efficiency policy and energy efficiency directive. I've been asked today to give you a bit an overview, a presentation about the renovation wave strategy, which the Commission adopted in October, which can give you a bit the policy framework of the policies on buildings and how they are also framed in the context of the broader goals of the Green Deal, and how the different instruments are also regarding information on buildings like EPC would fit in basically the efforts that are needed to increase the number of renovation and the depth of renovation, so to contribute to the energy and climate goals. Yeah, basically, so the idea and the context of the renovation wave strategy is really the Green Deal, because as you know, in buildings we consume the 40% of all the energy consumed across sector overall. So it's a very important area and sector to look at once we need to increase our efforts to reduce greenhouse gases and reduce energy consumption. And in that context, we have, of course, policies in place and legislation in place, but it was recognized that we definitely need to work more on the sector and across the board. So from our side, from what concerns energy performance, but there's the need for concerted efforts also in other areas, and on a multi-governance level also, so from the EU side, but also member states and local authorities, local communities, and of course also the market industry stakeholders have an important role to play. And as a goal of these efforts, we identified the need to double the annual energy renovation rate. According to our assessment, currently the rate of energy renovation is close to 1% annually. But if we look at deep renovation, this is much lower. So if we intend a deep renovation as renovation that basically achieve 60% of energy reduction, this is really a minor fraction to that. So we also need to make sure that we have tools in place to have renovation that are able to achieve higher energy savings. And also in that sense, EPC's energy certificate and the information they provide can play an important role. So for this strategy, basically, what we did, we identified basically some focus areas on which we need to concentrate the efforts, and we have identified as focus area the need to address energy poverty and worst performing buildings. And behind that, there are the consideration that we spend most of our time in buildings, and when buildings are not in good shape, from the point of view of energy performance, it's not only that we pay higher bills, but also that there are issues in terms of health and well-being. And this is also the case, in fact, in several European countries. Statistics shows that, especially in some countries, we have unfortunately a fraction of people that cannot keep their dwellings adequately warmed or cool. And also the issue of vulnerability, social exclusion related to that is diffuse, especially in some countries. So there's the need to act also in this area, and often what happens is that people in energy poverty are also the ones that live in the worst performing energy buildings. That's why, to address the issue at the core, we need to look also at this specific segment of buildings. Then important is also to look at public buildings and social infrastructure, and there the example is about schools and social housing, hospitals. The need to renovate this type of buildings is definitely very high, so it has to be put a focus on that. And then the third focus areas across the different types of buildings is the need to decarbonize heating and cooling, because the energy efficiency, energy performance of a building depend, of course, on the energy needs and on the overall thermal integrity, insulation of a building. But by doing renovation, we can also help a lot the goal to phase out fossil fuels, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions that depend from heating and cooling. So the slides that follow this broader introduction basically drive you throughout the different actions and the area that we have identified in the strategy, because an important component of the strategy is also an action plan of 21 points that we are basically working on throughout the Commission. And the first series of action have the goal of basically strengthening information and legal certainty and incentives. And this is exactly where also EPCs are in the picture. And in that context, we have identified the need to really strengthen this tool in different directions. And this is one of the areas that we are looking into in the current revision of the PPD, but I will tell you a bit more about it at the end of the presentation. And the other instruments that have been identified in the strategy as needing a strengthening are the energy audits and also looking at other tools like a building renovation passport and digital building logbooks. But we have also identified the need to have a stronger and a new instrument which can have really an impact on the renovation wave. And this is the introduction of mandatory minimum energy performance standards. This is going to be basically the key area that we are looking into in the PPT revision. And there the aim is really to identify trigger points for increasing the number of renovations across all countries and setting requirements for that, by providing also flexibility to member states on how to do that, with the overall goal really to address the worst performing buildings and renovate them at a bigger scale than what is happening right now. Another area of reinforced action is, of course, the area of funding and to support the renovation efforts, but also not only just grants or loans, but also technical assistance. And for that, of course, we are now in the phase of preparation of the recovery and resilience plans. And we have in that a specific focus on renovation, and member states are presenting currently to the Commission their plans, and we are looking and checking also the proposal made specifically for national incentives for renovation funded through the recovery and resilience plans. But there are also many other financial instruments in place, and actually when we adopted the renovation wave, we also published a staff working document explaining which are the other funding opportunities available. And to work in this area, we also have to look at, for instance, one tool that can help in that sense to direct investment to deeper renovation is a definition or a standard for deep renovation. And we are also looking towards developing that in the context of the EPPD revision. As I mentioned, it's not just the financing, but also technical assistance. And in that sense, the key instrument is the ELENA facility, which is run by the European Investment Bank. And this is a very important tool and area of intervention also to make available one-stop shop and technical assistance to develop renovation programs. Linked to renovation, there's also, of course, the link with the construction sector, which has a major role to play. And in that sense, we know that there is a need to reskill, upskill, and also increase the workforce in this sector. And we are looking into that across the Commission through action to improve training availabilities and curricula that are relevant for the construction sector, also through the Pact for Skills in close collaboration with the construction sector. It's not only about greenhouse gas and energy performance when you talk about renovation, but there's also the concern about sustainable built environment. And there are a number of initiatives that we need to accelerate from that side regarding standards for buildings climate resilience in the context of climate adaptation, digitalization tools, construction and demolition waste to really look at the whole life cycle of the building and also of the materials that go into construction to ensure that they are sustainable. As I mentioned, the efforts are needed across the board at EU level, national, but also it's very important that local authorities are also involved, and also citizens through also energy communities. And in that sense, we are also developing some specific tools. And one initiative that was launched together with the renovation wave is not mentioned in this slide, but it's very important, is the Bauhaus, the new European Bauhaus, which is this concept of really having renovations that are good for the people that have to live in these buildings, but they are also beautiful. So there are also aesthetic considerations to be made and consideration about the quality of constructions and renovation. And this is an initiative that is now in the design phase, and the first call for proposal for project is foreseen for after the summer. That was my last slide about the renovation wave, but perhaps I can say something more about the revision of the EPBD. So the Energy Performance of Building Directive, the need to strengthen it and its instrument was indeed recognized in the strategy as one of the key areas. We have the renovation wave already identified some of the tools that we need to develop, and one, as I mentioned, is the review of EPCs to strengthen, to improve the quality, enlarge the number of information that we can have in EPCs, and also work on the on EPC database and to digitalize the EPCs and the way how they are stored and information made accessible. There are also other elements of the PPD that we are planning to review, nearly NZEB standards, as I mentioned, minimum energy performance requirements and deep renovation. In terms of process, we are now in the phase of preparation of our proposal that is, the adoption is foreseen for the end of the year. And we are now also in a phase of stakeholder consultation. So we have an open public consultation ongoing, which is a questionnaire with questions on issues to address and on the how to do that. So I invite all of you who are interested in that to check on the Have Your Say portal and to reply to this questionnaire by the 22nd of June. And we are also organizing and preparing a series of dedicated events on some topics of the review. as I mentioned, this meeting is quite timely because next week we will have one stakeholder consultation event specifically on EPCs to hear views, but also to collect technical information and intelligence on how the implementation of EPCs is ongoing, what are the best practices, also to build on that, to strengthen really the tool. We needed to know what are the weaknesses and how they can be improved also based on the experiences that are already on the ground. So in that sense, it's why this meeting is relevant for us, because it gives the possibility to have an overview of what is ongoing. Also, in terms of research of how to improve the tool. And we look forward to hear your views and your contributions also in terms of knowledge and information about EPCs across Europe. Thank you very much. I will give it back to you, Olivier.
Thank you very much, Serena, for this very complete overview of the EPBD revision process and the renovation wave starting now in Europe. So we will now present all the 7 sister projects and this precursor additional project, Aldren project. I will explain why we wanted also to present Aldren. We have 5 minutes per project, so we will all have to manage very precisely the clock so that we have enough time after for the core discussion of the meeting. So just to recap again, I was the daily manager of the project, so the assisting coordinator and final coordinator of the project at the end. Aldren was a CSA project that started at the end of 2017 and which lasted 3 years and ended at the end of 2020, at the end of last year. Just trying to move the slides so it's working. So 8 European partners were involved from different fields, technical and research institutions, building certifiers and companies and professional associations. You can see a picture here because we organized an event in the EU Parliament 1 year ago to discuss the renovation wave and so to present the outputs of the project. The core of the project was to answer EPBD Article 11.9, which states that the Commission should adopt a voluntary common European certification scheme for non-residential buildings. And so Aldren developed the backbone of this scheme, which is in fact a voluntary EPC for hotels and offices, and which is made of several pages and sets of indicators that, so in the end, this voluntary EPC is standalone. It can be used per se, with set of indicators, reporting pages, and also links with associated tools. I will speak about that quickly. And it's modular, which means that with the indicators and the different modules, you can have this informative reporting in mandatory EPCs. So you could use part of Aldren or the whole of Aldren as additional information for mandatory national EPCs. And the other key point of the project was to study non-energy benefits of deep renovation and to rate them. So we developed an indicator for health and well-being, a rating at EU scale. We studied the potential inclusion of SRI and explanations about its components to make it user-friendly, and the link with investments or financial indicators, obsolescence risks of buildings. So you see the pages corresponding of the EVC about these non-energy benefits that we report in the Aldren EVC. So quickly, 4 standalone modules in the project about energy rating and targets, energy verification, comfort, well-being, cost, value, and risk. And 2 complementary reporting tools, so this European voluntary certificate and also BRP, which is in fact a tool that you can use through time with more detailed information that targets rather building managers, and that complements the EVC, which targets rather investors and building owners with more summarized information. With consistency of data between both tools developed in the project. We implemented the approach on 20 pilot studies in Europe, in several countries, and so we saw that Aldren answers a market request from investors, building owners, real estate companies, with a better knowledge of buildings and their operation, a clear vision of potential performance and renovation step to reach NZEB level over time. a clear interest about the increased competitiveness in real estate market if you have an improved overall performance related to energy improvements, also health, comfort, and management of obsolescence risks and resilience of buildings in the future, and a link between innovation actions and cost value of the building on the market to be able for building owners and real estate companies to interact with banks, investors, and property funds to convince them to provide funding for deep renovation ambitious projects. So just two insights. We have some, in fact, proposals or ideas also we would like to push forward in the consultation. Because we tested them, in fact, in the Aldrin project, so we have some feedback. The first one is that we think there could be a reporting of an EU performance rating on EPCs that would be alongside national EPC ratings as an additional section. We developed that in the Aldrin project because we developed this European rating scale that we calibrated with an NZEB level European based on the recommendations from the Commission, which is the class A of the scale. And the idea is to ensure comparability of EPCs between countries. So we are not going to replace, of course, the national ratings, but this way, if you have a EU energy class, you have the potential to do a EU benchmark. And European money for European method, because then with comparability of ratings from a country to another one, it will help to use EPCs better for EU funding and EU taxonomy. So we developed that for 2 types of buildings and 3 climates, and it's consistent with step-by-step renovation roadmaps. And the other key insight from the project is that we could have mandatory sets of indicators, non-energy, to highlight non-energy benefits in EPCs, to raise awareness with still voluntary or mandatory pages in national EPCs, which we tried with the modular approach of Aldrin, and to estimate all benefits from renovation. So we developed very quickly detailed rating about comfort and well-being, so temperature, acoustics, lighting, and air quality. For the SRI, we try to provide on EPC pages more details about its key components to make it more straightforward and user-friendly for building owners, because it's a very dense indicator with a lot of information. And we also studied market value and income increase after renovation with a new risk indicator that will assess the climate resilience and potential obsolescence of the building if it's not renovated. And that could be used by investors to channel funding for renovations. So that's it for the Aldrin project. So now we leave the floor to the sister projects and when we start with Extendo.
Yes, so thanks for the opportunity to share some thoughts and results from the Extendo project with you. My name is Lukas Kranzl. I'm working at TU Wien and I'm the coordinator of the project. Extendo stands for Extending the Energy Performance Assessment and Certification Schemes via a Modular Approach. The objective of the project is to support public authorities to properly implement, well manage and organize the transition to next generation EPCs. And this transition to next generation EPCs, we have organized in the project along 10 features. 10 features we again clustered into 2 groups. The first group are the 5 features on innovative EPC indicators, and the second group, the innovative handling of EPC data. And for each feature, we are developing certain methods, approaches, guidelines. We test them in buildings or corresponding system environments, and we discuss with stakeholders how an implementation can work. So one of the key prerequisites of the Extendo project is that EPCs need to be adopted better to end users' needs. As an end user and having a look on the EPC, I want to know, will I feel comfortable in my new home? And what about indoor air quality? Maybe also contribution to outdoor air quality. And very important to understand the energy label and how is it linked with my real energy consumption. So these are topics on which we are working in this first set of features. And with when we're talking about adding additional information, I think it's always important to also make sure we find a balance between providing additional information, user-friendliness, and the costs and benefits, and how this can be clearly presented. For some indicators, in particular the comfort indicator, we also need to distinguish clearly between asset rating and operational rating of buildings. So what is the key intention, what is the objective of this specific EPC scheme? To ensure this balance between costs and benefits, we have embedded the work into 4 cross-cutting criteria. So we want to ensure quality and reliability, user-friendliness, economic feasibility, and compliance with international standards. We already heard before that under the EPD revision, mandatory renovation requirements are being proposed and discussed, and I'm convinced that under such a policy setting, under such a regime of mandatory renovation requirements, there will be even a higher need for better guidance on the related renovation measures. So we need to improve the recommendations in EPCs, and we also need to accompany them better by building renovation passports, because I'm convinced that recommendations in EPCs have another objective than very detailed building renovation passports, which should serve more on avoiding lock-in effects and so on. Second, we need better accessible data. Here, logbooks will be an essential tool. Logbooks with clearly defined scope embedded in a clear legal framework. And of course, EPC databases are more and more important, not only as a basis of information for policymakers, but also for quality control measures and feedback loops to training of EPC assessors. And finally, we need the one-stop shops for implementation by establishing a connection between market actors and a link to financing options. Again, building logbooks, renovation passports, and so on. They can remove barriers and exploit the saving potentials. We are working on all these aspects and features in the second group of topics. And to come to an end, I want to raise your attention to two reports that we published last year. The first on the current status of EPCs and their potentials in European member states. We show the, let's say, to which extent reliability still needs to be improved, also to which extent the availability and coverage of EPCs needs to be enhanced. And the second report on understanding end user needs and expectations of next generation EPCs. We carried out a quite big end user survey in 5 European countries to better understand the end user needs and have a basis to develop our 10 features. Introductory reports and methods for each feature will be available very soon on our Extendo toolbox, and after testing them, we will have the final methods available next year. That's it. Thanks. I hope and think I kept the 5 minutes limit. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Lucas, for perfect time management and this very interesting presentation. So let's move on with QualityPC.
Yes, thank you for the invitation to this workshop. My name is Stefan Thomas. I'm working at the Wuppertal Institute for Climate, Environment and Energy, and I'm the coordinator of the QualityPC project. In this acronym, you see quality and deep renovation, because it stands for High Quality Energy Performance Assessment and Certification in Europe, accelerating deep energy renovation. Ah, yeah. One more. So the partners, again, you can see that later on. We have 12 partners from 8 European countries, and in 7 of these countries there will be the detailed assessment and implementation of the EPC schemes and improvements. our objectives are to enhance assessment, certification, and verification regarding both the quality and cross-EU convergence of the EPC schemes, and particularly the link between EPCs and deep renovation. For that purpose, we started with a thorough analysis of existing EPC schemes in all EU member states plus the UK, regarding especially whether a list of up to 50, almost 50 potential improvements to EPC schemes on assessment, issuance, design, verification and use are implemented already, and in which way, what are strengths and weaknesses of the national schemes. And we also have 4 rounds of workshops to gain stakeholder feedback in our project. And with the first round of these workshops, we boiled down this list to 7 priorities. We currently are in the development and testing phase of the project. And in October, we published the green paper on good practice in EPC assessment, certification and use that includes the draft solutions in these 7 priority areas. And these development priorities are, first of all, improving the recommendations for renovation that have to be provided on the EPCs so that they become the first step towards deep energy renovation. Then 2 tools that help linking these renovation recommendations and the EPCs with the implementation process. Priority B is an online tool that will allow users to get a first impression of the quality of their building and deep energy renovation recommendations as a start, also to know what to ask the advisors for, either when getting an EPC or a deeper advice. The next C is what we call deep renovation network platforms, which are one-stop shops for information, plus a function to link market actors on the supply side and their training and communication to potential investors. The next 2 have components both in regard to deep renovation and other aspects of the EPC schemes and other purposes of the EPCs. D is a proposal for regular mandatory assessor training as a requirement for certification or accreditation and registry, and to keep that accreditation. So that's why it should be regular, and it could focus both on updates in the assessment schemes and on to improving the renovation recommendations. E then is aiming to improve the user friendliness of the EPC forms, and there we developed an enhanced template. And the last 2 are then related to the mandatory use of the energy performance data or energy classes from EPCs in advertisements of buildings for rent or sale. There could be a tool for building owners that makes it easier for them to comply with this requirement, which could be advertising guidelines, which could be voluntary or mandatory. And finally, we looked at other potential ways to improve this compliance with the use of EPCs and EPC data in real estate advertisements. Just 2 examples. One is the recommendations that should be compatible with deep renovation and maybe also the first step to building deep renovation roadmap. Our guiding principle is that these should include component efficiency levels that are derived from NZEP standards, which we consider to be based on cost optimality, and which we take as a proxy for a deep renovation standard because it is not yet existing. And so we have, as a policy proposal, 15 areas of recommendations, and here you can see 2 examples. These, as well as the next, the improved, enhanced template for an EPC that could also be harmonized between or converging between the member states, is being tested currently in 100 pilot buildings. So you see the A plus or 8 to H scale, and the information would also be from a main option, a combination of recommendations, how much energy can be saved and how would the energy class improve and the energy performance. In the remainder of the project, we will have 2 more rounds of dialogues to provide guidance and also policy recommendations. And we will aim to implement some of the elements like the online platform and the deep renovation network platforms in the 7 member states participating in our project. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Stefan, for your presentation, very complete. Let's leave the floor now to the UserCentered project. I don't hear you on UserCentered side. Maybe it's the case also for other attendees. Maybe your microphone is off.
I cannot see my, okay. Yes.
We can hear you now. Yeah, it was not the case before. Maybe just for me, but
yes, it is okay. My screen was disappearing. Sorry for that. UserCentered towards a new generation of user-centered energy performance assessment and certification, facilitated and powered by the EPE Center. To give you an idea, the EPE Center, not many of you know it, it is the Service Center for Information and Technical Support on the new set of EPE standards and the international accepted assessment procedures for energy certificates. For more information, I can just refer you to the Center website. The UserCentered project in a nutshell, we started in 2019, and the main issue is to introduce a next generation of user-centered energy performance assessment and certification scheme. Value buildings in a holistic and cost-effective manner, supported by an EU-wide training and certification process for building professionals, and facilitate versions and quality and reliability using the EPE standards that has been developed under the mandate 480 and have been published in 2017, 2018, and are generally used by all member states as a basis for the assessment procedures for their energy certificates. But we try to present also national and regional choices on a comparable basis, because all the standards, they allow the users of the standards, the regulators in the member states, to use national choices, simplification levels, which makes it difficult to compare the energy certificates of buildings in the different member states. And we try to give a comparable basis for that as well, to help the member states to see how to do that in a proper way. Encourage the development and application of a holistic centered innovative solutions, including the smart readiness indicator, and encourage and support end users in decision making. So decision making on a deep renovation, and nudge for better purchasing, and instill trust by making visible the added value of the use of the energy performance certificates, but also the added value of deep renovation towards the better indoor environment in buildings. Strengthening the actual implementation of the EPD by providing and applying insights from perspective of all involved stakeholders. And we try to facilitate that and empower that in the near future in the EPC Center. So these three transitions parts was envisioned by the user. Full smooth implementation of the EPD and the underlying standards to assess the building energy performance. To go to the user-centered design for facilitating and accelerating building performance improvements, ranging from behavior change all the way to deep renovation. So show that also the user is center of the energy performance of buildings as well. And the leverage the synergies between smart readiness indicator for buildings and the set of EPC standards, shifting to the current EPC paradigm to evidence-based approach. For example, the building operational rating. Problem that operational rating is different from the asset rating, and how to show to the building owner and user how to handle that. Slide, yes. What we try to do is say, based on what the building assessor does and giving advice to handle operational rating, giving guidance how to deal with measured data as a basis for the building assessor and consultant to give information to the builder owner how to deal with the renovation process, coming to the operational rating solution. So compare the calculated data, the asset rating, with the measured data, producing advice on the building performance improvement. Finally, of course, coming to the operational rating solution. And this is the input for building passports, building renovation passports, as mentioned before. This is input for the National Energy Performance Database. And this is also input for the policymakers that have to set the national policy on renovation. And it triggers the performance improvements in the built environment. This is the core of the UserCentered project. So it is perception is reality, and let's change the perception from buildings to consume energy to the fact that the user of the building, the people they use the energy, they decide how to handle the building, how to use the building, and to which extent the renovation is feasible or not. And in this slide, we try to show that it is from the current state, it is the tailored EPCs, and that is mentioned also by different presenters from the other project, that you have to help the building owners that the EPCs are not directly understandable like they are now, and depending on the target group, to give them the information they need to decide on renovation actions. Thank you for your attention. These are our project partners.
Thank you very much, Jaap, for your presentation. I'm just looking at the clock. I must be the timekeeper. We are slightly late, but as expected, because we have many things to say about project, and I myself took a little bit more time than the 5 minutes, and I apologize. We have two options, because I think we will stop the presentation something around 1:20 at least, or 1:25. So either we slightly adapt the time of the two key remaining session open discussions after that, or we keep the same time frame, which means that from the side of coordinators of sister projects, we stay a little bit after 2:30 to discuss the practical first steps for the collaboration. But we will decide that after the presentations. So let's now move to the innovation action projects, and starting with Panacea.
Thank you, Olivier. Thank you, Andre, for this introduction and this opportunity. I'm going to give a brief overview. My control, yes, right, sorry. I had a delay. Okay, I'm going to give you an overview about the Panacea project, Smart European Energy Performance Assessment and Certification. So, what is the main goal of the Panacea project? Well, the main goal is to overcome the current EPC challenges. For instance, the gap between calculated and actual consumption patterns, lack of accuracy, lack of building users engagement, lack of convergence across the European Union, and so on. With this objective, Panacea develops an innovative, holistic, and flexible methodology for energy performance assessment and certification for buildings. The Panacea's methodology, currently under development, will cover relevant technical building innovations and will be integrated on an online platform, so-called SEPAP, Smart Energy Performance Assessment Platform. Well, how are we doing this at the moment? Well, developing innovation based mainly on these three pillars. Pillar 1 is related to next generation of features related to input data, covering, for instance, improved consideration of user behavior and occupant patterns, inclusion of smart and novel technologies such as on-site production of renewable energy and advanced energy management systems, and the use of building monitoring data to increase accuracy and develop a standardized format for data acquisition from different sources. Pillar 2 focus on next generation of outcomes that include, among others, new indicators useful for the development of policies that allow the energy transition and the decarbonization target by 2050. This pillar includes, for example, new global and partial indicators better understandable by end users, recommendations related to user behavior, tailored recommendation based on cost-optimal solution for deep renovation of buildings, and a double-oriented information included in the EPC. On one side, focus on administration needs based on standardized operational conditions, and on the other side, focus on building user needs based on actual use. And last but not least, Pillar 3 covers next generation of tools, because in our view, next generation of EPCs needs a next generation of web-based tools and their innovative capabilities. In this case, the whole Panacea methodology, based on 3 different energy assessment methods and its decision matrix for the selection of the most suitable one, will be integrated on the CEPAP. The CEPAP will also integrate inverse modeling and automated calibration procedures for dynamic building energy simulations, obtaining very accurate models, but reducing at the same time the computational costs and improving the cost effectiveness of the whole process. Well, in order to validate and disseminate the Panacea methodology, we have developed a network mainly comprised of these 3 aspects. In numbers, we are managing 5 regional exploitation boards covering the whole European Union through 5 geographical regions, comprising European policymakers, certification bodies, consumer associations, professional associations, and so on. We are conducting 15 workshops during the project lifetime, 3 per pilot country, focused on integration of end-user perceptions, needs, and feedback. And we are going to validate the methodology through 15 case studies, 3 per pilot country, that is to say in Austria, Belgium, Greece, Spain, and Finland. Okay, these 3 aspects are also closely linked with the methodology development. To meet the project objective and ensure the quality and impact, as well as the reliability, user-friendliness, and cost-effectiveness of the methodology, we have built these 3 feedback loops. Feedback loops in order to provide inputs and support to the methodology development itself. Each of these 3 feedback loops will allow to support a specific aspect or methodology's target. For example, workshops regarding final user needs and perceptions, supports in terms of user-friendliness, clarity of information provided, enhanced user awareness of energy efficiency, and occupant behavior patterns. The activities in the context of the 5 regional exploitation boards will support in global aspects related to overall targets of the European Union. And the testing and demonstration board, through the assessment of the case studies in the 5 pilot countries, will validate the methodology from a technical perspective in terms of accuracy and cost effectiveness. Well, this is our team. The Panacea project involves 10 organizations from 6 different European countries. The project started in June 2020 and will end in May 2023. It's an innovation action, as you previously said. And for more information, I invite you to visit our project website at epanacea.eu. We are also encourage you to subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on our social networks in order to remain updated on recent developments. You may also choose to contact me directly via email, and thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Maria, for this overview. And now let's leave the floor to Idais.
Thank you, Oliver. Welcome, everybody. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you, Oliver, and welcome, everybody. Yes, I would like to present EDICE project, which stands for Energy Flexible Dynamic Building Certification. That is for greater temporal resolution of energy performance. Okay, now it works. My name is Michał Pomianowski, and I work at Aalborg University in Denmark, and I am EDICE coordinator. And before we go into the project, I would like to shortly present who we are. We are 10 partners, 2 universities, 5 companies, 1 national energy agency, and 2 municipalities that are mostly involved in demonstration actions. And you can see we had a kickoff meeting that we managed to make in these difficult times physically, at least some of us. Before I will go into the objectives of the project, I wanted to spend a little bit time behind to indicate the motivation for the project. And the motivation for the project is can be presented by the results from previous studies, and some of the results of these previous studies you can see on this slide. Well, what you can see on the left-hand side graph is the result that comes from 230,000 buildings with energy performance certificate. This is the blue color, and 135,000 buildings with metered energy for heating. And the results come from Denmark. And what you can see on the graph here is that there is a quite significant performance gap between the theoretical consumption and actual consumption. The buildings rated low, EFG, perform better than they are theoretically calculated, and buildings that are rated with high energy performance certificate A, B, and C, they underperform in actual performance comparing to the theoretical calculations. These calculations, EPC calculations in majority of the countries in member states, they are based on static calculations. This means usually there are monthly average calculations that are done. So in that way, they have a limited possibility to reflect what is the actual thermal performance of the building, that is normally dynamic performance. Yes, on the right-hand side, you can see another result from another study that has been done later on in Switzerland, and this study is on 1,172 buildings that were energy retrofitted, where the data was available from the theoretical calculations and from metered energy consumption, both before and after retrofitting. And what you can see on the graph is that if you do the energy theoretical calculations using the Swiss EPC tool, you overestimate the energy. That would be, let's say, the building that are performing very bad, F and G. So that is in a good agreement with the previous study from Denmark, which will perform actually better than the theoretical calculation indicates. And if you do the theoretical calculation after the energy renovation, then you have a much better performance than the actual performance of the building. And that is again with the good agreement from the analysis from Denmark. What does it mean? It means that the theoretical savings expected, calculated with current EPCs or static compliance tools, will overestimate the energy savings that are actually obtained. And this is an issue that requires, in our opinion, more focus and more work, and it might be a part that should be reflected in the new EPC calculation methods. So to sum up, the current EPCs reflect some kind of a limited capacity to reflect on actual energy condition of building stock, or even each single building. And the second thing is that by using the static EPC results, we have a limited reliability about the results for predicting energy savings from the renovation actions. And so this is the question about the reliability of the results that we produce, which is reported in many documents that I have read about EPCs so far. So this gives a bit background for the objectives of EDICE, which are: the first thing, we want to deliver a methodology for dynamic certification of buildings that will be based on openly available resources and tools. And here we have two actually activities. One is focusing on dynamic modeling, and another one is on feasible monitoring. There are some other activities here related to how to do the dynamic modeling in still not too complex manner, but providing at the same time credible result. And the second activity is about feasible monitoring. That is a very important aspect, in our opinion, for the broader and further adoption of monitoring into the EPC. The second objective is to develop integration framework, so some bridging agents, information model, and repository that will simply support all of the actions that are related to modeling and to monitoring of buildings. The third objective is to provide accurate and clear feedback at the right time. So this is about providing the right KPIs to end users at the right time. So there is there can be made a reflection about the operation of the building and actual energy use. Very often now the billing or the data that is available from EPC comes with a time delay, so there is no relation between the action on the building and energy use in the building. The next objective is to obtain, of course, operational energy savings. We propose a free running concept that is focusing on switching off the mechanical installations and grading the building based on that, and also on predictive model control. The last objective is to illustrate our concept and methods on number of demonstration buildings. We have a number of buildings located in Denmark, Italy, and Switzerland that will be used as a demonstration for this methodology. And in this slide, I wanted to share with you the framework for EDICE integration, which is a simplified framework. It is more complex in reality, but for the clarity of the concept, I used the simple one, where you can see in the middle of the concept, you have a data collection platform, an integration system, Fusix, which collects inputs from different, let's say, enablers, which are the modeling, which is the simulation data, which is the static data of the building, which are the renovation roadmaps, weather forecast, and energy demands, and which produces at the same time the output to users and to the building, so that the user and the building can be activated based on the produced output, and so there is an interaction. Finally, because time is running, I just wanted to say that the assessment level for proposed by the EDICE is moving the assessment of types of EPC from, let's say, the blue area, which is a design or standard operation of the building, into actual and dynamic area, which is used for monitoring, energy audit, for validation and optimization of the buildings. Yes, now I finished. Thank you very much. I believe questions are for later on.
Thank you very much, Michal. I'm looking at the clock again, so it's 1:20. If the two last projects could do their best to end around 1:30, so that we have enough time then for the remaining core discussions with CINEA and DGNR. So D2EPC now.
Good afternoon. This is Apostolos Tsolakis, and I represent the Center for Research and Technology Hellas, which is the coordinator of D2EPC, which stands for Next Generation Dynamic Digital Energy Performance Certificates for Enhanced Quality and User Awareness. Very briefly, I will present who we are. We are 12 partners and one linked third party from 7 European countries. As you can see, we are well distributed around Europe. We have 6 highly diverse pilot buildings, from individual buildings to production halls and apartments in larger districts. And we have a consortium that has a lot of expertise on the domain. Working on the objectives, QualityPC wants to introduce and establish the concept of next generation dynamic energy performance certificates, and we try to holistically address the problem, starting from secure and verified IoT infrastructure. We want to provide verified data for supporting the process of energy performance certification. We focus on building information modeling and how that could be integrated with the concept of digital twins to support the proper provision of data and data models for a unified approach. We strongly support the concept that additional information is required for next generation EPCs, so that we aim to introduce a lot of new indicators, financial and lifecycle cost indicators, energy performance, and lifecycle analysis, smart readiness, of course, as well as comfort and well-being. We target and couple GIS technology to our scheme so that we can enable better policy making for neighborhood, district, or city level EPCs. We want to provide also additional services for stakeholders that can leverage on such information, such technologies. We want to deliver improved EU-based standardized dynamic asset and operational rating methodologies. So we have defined already 2 working groups, one for the asset rating and one for the operational rating, that are working together in order to exploit existing standards and provide evidence-based methodologies for both asset and operational rating, because this is something that will facilitate a lot existing as well as enrich EPCs. We envision to include polluter pays for active and user engagement, so both rewards and penalties are required in various forms, and we will explore further on this aspect and introduce it through our solution and our platform. We aim to also include AI-driven recommendations, so both for asset rating and operational rating. We explore all the potential solutions, and we provide for cost-effective solutions to all the stakeholders that are involved. And finally, what we would like to provide through all of these processes is the links for digital passport, renovation passport, and of course the renovation roadmap, as well as to explore our connection with digital logbooks. Right now, the project is in its first year. We already have some preliminary results from our first activities, which we'll try to publish in the next few months in the form of white papers. And of course, as we progress, more material will be made available to the project. And we invite you to check our website and our social media in order to be able to see our results. And of course, if there are any suggestions for further collaboration, or you would like more information, we are you're more than welcome to send us an email and we'll get back to you. Thank you. I'll try to keep it short.
Thank you very much, Apostolos, for this presentation. And now I'm leaving the floor to my colleague at CSTB, Rofaida Laresh. We are coordinating the EPC project together, and Rofaida is the technical director of the project. Yes, can you speak again just to be sure?
Hello, everybody. I am Rofaida Laresh from CSTB. I'm the technical director of EPCerts project, and Olivier Grelou is the project coordinator. The project starts at September 2020, and it will be finalized by the end of 2023. I am so happy to chair this workshop with you and to present some key points of EPCerts project. Okay. I try. Okay. Okay, EPCerts aims to develop an innovative process for new generation of EPCs for residential buildings. digital toolbox will support this process. We mainly consider two targets. The first one is quality and reliability of EPCs. For that, the objective is to facilitate and to improve practices for EPC assessors. And the second one is to highlight the benefits for building owners and to address appropriate indicators, appropriate innovation recommendations, and we will use the user-centric approach. So as you see in this slide, the key words are data collection, quality checks, innovation roadmaps, and non-energy benefits. Okay, we are 11 partners from different backgrounds. There are research and higher educational. There are energy providers and energy services companies, and also professionals. We are 7 countries: Belgium, Germany, Spain, Italy, Slovakia, Luxembourg, and France. The whole process will be applied over 150 dwellings in 6 countries. I will highlight the main actions and outputs. There is an action about automated data collection and data enrichment. For example, the use of on-site scan methods for data collection, and also the use possibly of public databases for enrichment of data, and the use of new technologies for this enrichment of data. There is action about quality procedures and consistency checks. This is linked with ISO standards using, for example, expert rules, expert values, and also data crossing tests. Another action is to use of measured energy consumption and deployment of smart meters. This should allow us to make model calibration or model verifications or model verification or method assessment method verifications, and also it will allow us to provide operational ratings indicators. There is also action about digital tools. Here, the main point is the information sharing, the common language, and the data interoperability between all these digital tools, for example, the logbooks, the building renovation passport, and the EPCs. And finally, there is a very important action which is to co-design of the certificate with owners and assessors. The idea is to provide indicators that are could be appropriate by the owners, and to point of the non-energy benefits, the other benefits of the renovation, and to provide a renovation roadmap. This implementation of pilot dwellings will be done after the training of EPC assessors of this process. I will finally give some messages about EPBD revision. EPCerts could provide some inputs, but I will focus on 2 messages: quality check and renovation recommendations. For quality check, the idea is introducing a mandatory minimum set of quality checks at European scale, including control indicators and data sources. It could be done through 2 elements: a standardized control report that could be as an annex to EPC or a separate document. And the second element is the self-checking algorithm and consistency tests to facilitate the independent controls for the assessors. These 2 elements are currently developed in EPCerts in connection with several national energy performance calculation methods and also with ISO standards. And for innovation recommendation, the idea is to link this with the innovation roadmap. The innovation roadmap backwards from NZEP level, we propose that, and we about class A of the EPC and other indicators. And we suggest to have one or several steps, both options being consistently presented to the owner to avoid lock-in effect. To do that, there are the experience and the development done in Ireland for non-residential building, and we suggest to adapt and to improve this development within EPC Recast project. So thank you for your attention, and we can give some other details maybe in discussion.
Thank you very much, Rufaidah, for the presentation. Now we arrive at the core part of our discussion today with this forward-looking session that will be moderated by Annette and Paul from DGNR. So just once again, looking at the clock, we thought that it could last 1 hour, and it's since it's the main target of the meeting today, we should not diminish too much this session, but still have some time at the end to lay out the first steps of the collaboration framework between the projects. So maybe my suggestion is that this session could last 45 to 50 minutes. So that we can introduce the first step of collaboration after that, and I guess that maybe we might end slightly after 2:30 if that's not an issue with project coordinators. Of course, feel free to write in the chat if you have an issue with this agenda, since you might have other appointments in the afternoon. So I will leave the floor to Annette and Paul. Our idea quickly is to, since you requested several inputs from us, so potential reports, recommendations, etc., we could provide to you for the PBD revision process and consultation. And then, of course, it's you will tell us how you would like to organize this forward-looking discussion. The main point we thought is that we have here panelists, generally project coordinators, but we have also other attendees from the project consortiums. So the idea is that they write their questions in the Q&A section. Then Annette and Paul, it's up to you to select these questions if you want these people to speak out and to switch their microphone on. I will check the Q&A session to be sure that we do not lose important questions. And then it's up to you to manage the session the way you want. So thank you once again for attending this meeting and for moderating this session.
Olivier, right, sorry, I'm very sorry about it, but I understood this session in a slightly different well, in fact in a bit of a completely different manner, because the issue is that right now we are in the review of the EPBD, so we are very much in a listening process right now. So we've identified 3 areas that we think are very relevant, and we would like to hear a little bit what are your thoughts, your concerns about it. Of course, there is unfortunately there is no time to have a detailed discussion about it. So for us, the idea is mainly to identify the areas where we think we can dig into a bit more detail with the projects. So we don't have the answer to a lot of these questions because we are looking for the answer to these questions. So really, we would like to hear the input from the projects.
In fact, this is exactly what we expected.
Okay.
We are in line. We in fact organized also this meeting because we knew there would be this workshop next week on April 29, and we sent also the public questionnaire consultation to all the sister projects so that they can have a look at the your quick questions and think about inputs. What I'm just saying is that what we thought with Andre is that project panelists could directly switch on their microphone and provide answers. But then if the conversation stalls or we see that we have very interesting inputs on the Q&A session, then you can grant, you can let additional people from the consortium speak.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's absolutely fine for me. Just just a few words of introduction then. Just to remember the role of the EPC. It's first and foremost an information tool. The EPBD sets the framework for the EPCs to work, and they are there really to allow consumers to compare different buildings. So it is a tool, same when we buy a car, same when we buy a washing machine, etc., for us to have an idea of how is this building going to behave more or less. Then the EPCs are also supposed to provide some information on what you can do to this building, how it could be improved. And what we see also is that the role of EPCs has been enlarged a little bit by the proper use of the EPCs. And we see that nowadays they are very much used, for example, to check compliance with regulations. So to check, for example, that the building indeed as designed was built compliant with regulations. And also there is a link to finance. So a lot of the times the EPC is used to certify that an improvement has taken place. And also we're starting to see a bit of use from the real estate, sector. So our first question would be, what do you think is needed to strengthen this information role of EPCs? What additional information could be included in the EPC? What kind of indicators, and also how we can improve the recommendations in the EPCs. And now I really leave you the floor open. We've calculated about 15 minutes for this question. And please bearing in mind that I would like to hear a bit from everybody. Keep your intervention short if possible.
Thank you very much. I will not be the first to speak, so I leave it to other project coordinators and panelists to speak out. Maybe we can switch our cameras on if that makes it a little bit more dynamic.
Yes, it is a challenging question, the first question. Well, additional, if you want to do something apart from comparing buildings with the EPC, you have to add information on the operational rating of EPBD users, and also preferably information on the indoor environment in the building. And the next step is to show how you could improve the building based on a reliable assessment procedure, calculation procedure, is which measures and what the target could be. And then you could report a list of possible renovation actions and targets that can be reached in the energy performance of that particular building, and what will be also the effect on the indoor environment at the same time. It is just a few sentences, but it includes a lot of action. It's not very simple steps you have to take. That additional information should be great to have it, and it looks more like a building passport at that moment, but to connect that to the energy performance certificate. But this was my answer on the first question.
Thanks a lot, Jaap.
Vida, you raised your hand. Maybe we can raise our hands on the video section so that we see who wants to speak. We don't hear you, Vida.
I fully agree what Jaap addressed now, but I could just add some additional information. I think that for residential buildings with one owner, it could be interesting to add some information about envelope performance and equipment efficiency, because the information about energy consumption is not enough easy to understand. What is more appropriate for owners is maybe some indication about indicators about envelope in performance and equipment efficiency.
If I may add to this, QualityPC has proposed in its enhanced EPC template form a section where the current status of the building envelope, its components, and also the components of the building systems are rated with a traffic light system from red to very inefficient to green to quite efficient, in line with the current legal standards for major renovation. And also the recommendations on each of these components are shown in the same traffic light system. So this would make it easier for the user to see which parts of the building are good and which are not, and which how could they be improved. And also, as I showed, several countries already have when they show the energy performance of the buildings on a scale, they already have the new rating, the new energy class that can be achieved, and also adding the savings that can be achieved from a combination of the recommended measures.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, Maria.
Yeah, I don't know what is the term. So, okay, now I would like to say that, yeah, I agree that EPCs should include additional information, mainly oriented to end users, to building end users, with additional and more clear indicators, better understandable for them, because the non-renewable primary energy indicator is not clear for building users at all. So we could include cost indicators or partial indicators, maybe with efficiency for fabrics or HVAC systems and so on. And also the user dimension, so taking into account actual consumption patterns is a key aspect of the next generation of EPCs, because it will improve the accuracy of the results and the recommendations for energy efficiency measures, no? Supporting energy efficiency and, yeah, the building renovation itself.
Yeah,
thank you.
This is Lucas. I would also like to add a few things on first. On how can we improve the value of recommendations. I agree with Maria that adding costs would be an important point. That was also one of the results of our end user survey. So expected cost of renovation measures. But second, I think it also needs a better guidance or even standardized approach, because there is also a conflict of interest between the seller of a real estate object who buys the EPC, let's say, yeah, and the buyer of the real estate object, because the seller would like to see in the EPC, yeah, there will be more or less no measures required to improve the building, and this in reality has an impact on the type of recommendations as we see it in practice. So I think here we would also need to give more guidance on the way how the recommendations exactly need to be developed, and also to make sure that they are really in line with long-term renovation strategies on the national level. Regarding the link to building renovation passports, I see actually the logbook as a crucial element to link also different to link, for example, EPCs and building renovation passports, because in the logbook, the relevant data could be stored, which could be either fed from the EPCs or the building renovation passports, depending what is first. And then the next one, so for example, if the EPC is the first one, then the data is already stored in the logbook, and the building renovation passports can be developed much faster, or the other way around. So I think these, so I see a strong linkage of these three tools. These are some.
Yes, it's interesting feedback, also feedback from Aldrin, because we developed there an EVC, so an EPC and a BRP, where we had a renovation roadmap and a passport, and we took a lot of time to discuss what should be the links between both tools. What we see is that the EPC gives a picture of the building at a given time, at a given moment, while the logbook and the BRP in general is a more detailed tool where we have more information that can be updated through time. So there you need to have consistency of the data between tools. For instance, if you're simulating the building in another context than the EPC and you have provided a lot of data input for your calculation, you're going to store it in your logbook, and which means that then you should reuse this data for your EPC. So we must ensure data interoperability between all of these tools, which is a very important thing first. Maybe another topic I would like to stress, because there is also about renovation roadmaps. What we think and what we want to develop, for instance, in EPC Recast, is that the renovation recommendations on the EPC should be by themselves a renovation roadmap. It can be more simplified than what you might find in a BRP or in another tool, but it should be presented this way because we need to show to the building owner what are the steps to reach the maximum performance level of the building, the NZAB level. So this is why, for instance, our approach was to define first the final stage of the building, the best performance it can get, so which is the NZAB level, and then with all the renovation actions, and then to see what would be the steps to reach this final stage of the building. So, for instance, on DPC, you could have you could present recommendations with just one renovation, one step to reach the final maximum NZAB level if possible, and the other option would be to display on the same certificate several steps to reach that, so that the owner understands what can be done depending on his money and his priorities.
I could also add on the logbooks and the approach. I think that we need to highlight the fact that a European standardized approach is required, because we're talking about unifying the information from various member states. It's essential to have a common ground. So it's quite important to provide for such an approach. And of course, even if we include additional information like smartness, which seems to be one of the hot topics in new building, and of course, comfort levels and financial information, which are very important, we mustn't fall into the trap of making the outcome more complex. So we have to take into account that the final outcome should be simple to understand and simple to use from the various stakeholders. As for recommendations, I think that we should take into account that by now there are much more stakeholders that are interesting in the results. So we have the building owner, as stated. We have real estate that's getting down on that. We also have manufacturer, material providers, service providers. We have a lot of different people that can leverage from the EPC process and the outcome. So we can provide different recommendations based on the target group.
Just one very quick question from my side to dig a little bit more into one specific area, because I've noticed you've talked about linkage with other schemes like the building renovation passports, the logbook. What about links with other initiatives like the Smart Vanity Indicator, or even a bit outside for example, the levels framework on an environmental performance, or sorry, not environmental performance, environmental life cycle assessment of buildings. Would you have any thoughts or impressions on this?
If I can start from my side, I think that it's the other way around. We need, and the common approach that we see from all of the approaches today is that we need to incorporate these approaches and these schemes to the EPC process. So most of the work that is currently being undergoing is how the SRI can be integrated in the EPC process, how we can introduce sustainability indicators as well, so that we can take these schemes and include them in the overall process and the final EPC result. But also in the outcome will allow to individually assess these indicators as well. So by creating a uniform approach that takes into account the SRI, for example, and we assess the smartness in our final EPC result, we can also provide for the SRI report itself. So I think we should examine how to integrate these schemes to the new EPC.
Yeah, I agree. I think what is important is whether we need to or not if the EPC is a central point where we have the central information that the building owner and other stakeholders use to plan also renovation projects. And if that's the case, and if the EPC is the key entry point at EU scale for renovation recommendations and assessment of buildings, then it means that this is where we need to pick and adapt existing indicators that have been developed in other schemes, and not the other way around. So I fully agree. I fully agree with that. Maybe another point is that I saw that you wrote EU Green Taxonomy on the screen, is that especially EPC starts to be used in several countries. It's also the case in France to fund renovation projects. So which means that the rating must be reliable, so that then you provide money to the right projects, and there is a consistency between the projects that you fund also at EU scale. And if this is European money, it should be provided for European methods. So which means that you need European indicators then on your EPC, then to get European money to renovate buildings. So this is why it's important to have European energy performance ratings on EPCs. They can be alongside, once again, the national energy ratings, of course, should not replace them, but we should display them on the page. And for instance, this is what we try to develop in Advent for offices and hotels. So it can be done also for with another scheme, but also for other building types.
And sorry, I'm very conscious of the time, so I would say that's sorry. I do really want to continue the discussions, but I'm also very aware of the timing. If you have something quick to add, that's fine.
About the green taxonomy, in one of our workshops, potential conflict of interest or policies was mentioned. In that deep renovation is usually defined as 60% of savings, whereas at that point in January in the green taxonomy draft there was 30%. I'm not sure if that is still the case and if that could be a conflict, but yeah, just to mention it.
Okay. Thanks. No, thanks for pointing that out. The value is still 30%, but it's a medium renovation. It's not it's defined as a medium renovation, not as a renovation. But yeah, thanks for that. And you last mentioned quality, and I think that's a perfect segue for the next question. Annette, would you like to take the floor?
Yes, please. You already in some of your presentations mentioned the quality aspects, but please, we would like to hear more from you on quality aspects and also on database aspects. So who would like to go first? I'm not really sure how to see if hands are raised. Now I can see the participant list.
I could maybe start. So this is Lucas.
Yes, please.
In Extendo, we are working on two specific aspects of EPC databases, and the first one is how quality assurance methods can be introduced in EPC databases, so to have an automatic procedure to identify possible errors in EPCs, and which then could be either rejected automatically or to be sent to manual checking, which would be much more effective than just randomly selecting any EPCs for manual checking. And the second aspect is that these results of the quality checking in the EPC databases could then also be fed back to the training of EPC assessors, because with the time, when these quality assurance methods will be implemented in EPC databases, there could be a rich ground of insights. Where are the difficult points where EPC assessors usually make errors, or which leads to false EPCs? And so the idea is to create a process to feed back these insights of the quality assurance in the EPC databases to the training of the EPC assessors. So this is these are the ideas which we are working on in the Extendo project.
Perhaps I could add to that. I agree that, of course, the assessors should be professionals, and there should be a certification scheme in place to check their quality. For example, in the Netherlands, we have a third-party certification at least, and it is a step in the right direction. So you need professional people, of course. You need training, and you need a certification scheme, because otherwise there is no third party who has the ability to check randomly the EPCs. But in many countries there is not such a scheme active at this moment.
Okay, thank you very much. I can see that Maria, you have your hand raised.
It was a time ago, but it's fine. It's also fine. No, I want to speak also. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, what my colleague said regarding training and certification of energy performance assessors are very important. But regarding the database, the quality and the database, and what should be included in the database, I think that high quality database regarding cost for implementation of energy conservation measures, it could be very valuable for energy for EPC assessors. Indeed, including in this database detailed description of the measures and a rough classification, maybe, based on the building envelope measures, HVAC measures, renewable energy sources measures, and building automation and control system measures. Trying to add more smart and novel technologies to support the energy transition and the decarbonization target.
Thank you. Are there other comments?
I think Hofaida raised her hand.
In EPCerts, yeah, thank you. In EPCerts project, we think that there are many ways to make this quality control of EPCs. Apart of the self-checking of data collection, of enrichment of data for assessors, we think that there is a way to make this quality for the EPCs by providing in the same time of the EPC of a report that could contain some information and intermediate data and indicators that are come from assessments and that are not put on the EPC. This standardized document could be a kind of proof of the quality of information displayed on EPCs. So we are working on this document and how to make it more common for at a European level.
Thank you.
If I could also add on this, I think that data quality is one of the first points that has to do with the overall quality of EPCs. So either we're talking about asset rating or operational rating, where data quality is even more important. The need to provide for credibility tools and verifiability tools are very important. And this may be easier if we try to adopt digital solutions like building information modeling, for example. Then it will be easier to identify any quality problems to the data themselves before proceeding to the EPC process. By verifying the data, we can have high quality results.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to take the floor? Unfortunately, for some reason, I can't see directly if somebody raises the hand.
Well, I can find my hand, but I want to say that which kind of features should the database have? I think a database should have two. One is, of course, the energy certificate itself with all the information that is revealed to the client, but also include the underlying data on which the energy certificate is based, because that is the only possibility to check the quality by randomly, of course, of the product delivered by the assessor. So you really have to set up a national database where these two levels are maintained. And that is also this lower level, so the data used to assess the energy certificate is also a very valuable database for the energy passport or renovation passport, whatever name you will give it. Thank you.
Yeah. And Olivier, did you have a comment?
Yes, so referring to what my colleagues also say in the question section, which we can look at. Once again, we talked about operational ratings and simulation-based ratings. So how do we define? This is a question raised by my colleague Johan Singibel. What do we call quality? Is that the one or is that the other one? And if you display both ratings on the EPC, then of course it will force in a way the EPC assessors to try to bridge the gap between actual energy consumption and theoretical energy consumption. It could be used, for instance, for model calibration. Of course, techniques and tools that you would use to better calculate energy performance is maybe not something that is in the direct scope of EPBD text, but the fact that you can display operational rating at the same time than the simulated rating on the EPC will also help improve the quality. And remembering also one of the presentations from I tried to is that well, one of the project with an introduction about the difference between actual energy consumption and simulated energy consumption shows that this is a very important topic.
Yes, it is EDICE.
Yeah, thank you. I was looking for your name and the name of the project.
Yes.
I'd like to support the suggestion that basic data that were used to calculate performance put into the database because that's very important for making the database a link between, for instance, an EPC and building renovation passport. Yeah, for instance, also for use in a more detailed assessment of the building.
Thank you. And with this, I suggest that we move on to the third question. How would you like to continue? And if we could change the slide also. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So the final section is how to improve the number of EPCs. So at the moment we have the obligation for EPCs to be provided only the obligation. Sometimes people get EPCs for other reasons, but the obligation is only when a building is rented or sold. So should we think of additional trigger points to increase the number of EPCs? If those additional trigger points are relevant, which ones? And then also with regards to the harmonization of EPC levels, which we see as a vehicle also to increase the number and coverage of the EPCs. How can we improve the harmonization of EPCs, bearing in mind that there are massive difference between there are significant differences between the EPC schemes themselves, even though the thermodynamics behind the calculations are the same in a way. So yes, please, the floor is yours. Yes, Michal?
Yes, well, I think it depends. So additional trigger points to increase the number. Well, I think it depends, again, what kind of EPC are we talking about, if it's simulated one or operational one. Because if we bring this subject to an operational one, then it lives with the building. The EPC is in a way living with the building, it's changing. So it's not about the number of buildings being rated, but the time over which the buildings are rated, and the EPC is updated simply with a certain frequency. So if it's a simulated one, you can generate it once. If it's dynamic one, you can it's created by the dynamic tool. It can be also created once, but once it is operational, in principle, it lives with the building. So it is issued with a certain frequency.
Just to add to that and to the question of power, I understood your question in the fact that a lot of buildings that don't switch from ownership or renting ship, they don't have energy certification. And why do these people or organizations want to have an energy certificate? I think, of course, it is up to the national regulator, but finally, people will find out that their energy bill will increase in time because of the energy policy. And then they may consider to ask some financial support to improve the building. And in that moment, there is, of course, easy to ask for an energy certificate. But otherwise, given the legislative principles in Europe in general, I don't see any other possibilities for requiring energy certificates for people who own a building if they don't move it around.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jaap. Just to comment, because I understand your answer also. It's very much focused on residential EPCs, perhaps, yeah. Or it's the one where I see the most direct links. Just think also there are other types of buildings. There are non-residential buildings. There are public buildings, offices, sports centers, cultural centers, etc. So my question is about all the different types. It's not. Please don't think that I'm thinking only about residential buildings. But thanks a lot. Yeah.
Can I have a comment, please?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Rufaidah.
Okay, I think that there is a way to increase the number of buildings with EPCs. It's to make the link between financial instruments and EPC. So to make mandatory to have the EPC before to ask for financial instruments and to have this financial aid when the target is achieved. So there are two things in my comments.
Yes, and
Thanks a
I
lot.
remember. Yes, and I remember the discussions in the beginning of EPBD that there was discussion between the energy sector and this, and there was the question if EPCs could be helped to also have an influence on the energy contract between the building owner and the supplier of energy, so that they could regulate the taxation level on the energy based on the EPC, and that could also be an issue that could be considered.
Can I ask if you can see like a trigger point that is not connected either to ownership change and it's not directly connected to renovation? So if somebody is keen on doing a renovation, he might be asked by the bank to have an EPC, for example. But somebody who is not considering the renovation and is not considering to sell or buy a property, but for their own property, what could be a trigger point that they get an EPC and then they might start thinking about renovation after getting the EPC? Because this is a big target group that needs to be addressed, and this would boost renovation. The people that have not considered it because they never considered it and never needed an EPC to see, okay, this is really bad performing. What can I do? What would be a trigger point for them to get an EPC and draw them for renovation?
Yes, I agree. There is also a trigger point in some countries in the Netherlands. We have banks who give a reduction on the interest rate for mortgages if you have a high EPC. So it could also be found in the financial sector. Yes, I agree.
Like a tax incentive, let's say.
Yeah, like a tax incentive, but then I have a lower interest rate because I have an A-class building. And that's not only for residential, but that's also residential.
Thanks.
Maybe, please, Michel.
Yes, thank you. Maybe the motivation could be also triggered by the utility companies, but not in the sense that utility companies soon will be able to tell you what is your with again high frequency, what is your energy use, because they have access to data from smart meters, both electricity and district heating utility companies. So in the way they might be the first one to inform their customers if something is wrong with their building or if they simply use more than they are expected. This could be a trigger to do the analysis of the building. In that sense, issue the EPC for the building.
Thanks, Michal.
I would also, I would also suggest, it's not a technical perspective, but I would suggest a strong marketing campaign because most of citizens don't know anything about EPCs. So it's impossible they ask for them if they don't know them.
Thanks, Maria. That's a very good point, and I would also add a lot of people don't know about EPCs, and a lot of people know the wrong things about EPCs as well.
Yeah.
If I could also add a point, perhaps we could consider another approach. For example, there are studies, if I remember correctly, that suggest when there is a good time to renovate a building based on the construction date. So if we consider that certain periods should have a optimally renovation after 50 or 60 years of the building life cycle, then perhaps we could use the need for an EPC at that time as a trigger, not only to create the EPC, but also drive the renovation. So if we take the studies into account and see that a building that was constructed in the 50s could need most likely renovation after 40 or 50 years, and this is when it should also be obliged to issue an EPC, and that would also create the results, make evident the benefits of having this assessment.
In all those potential trigger points that the last 2-3 contributions, wouldn't it be better to promote and support financially that the building owner receives a building renovation passport based on a thorough advice and analysis of the building, and then okay, based on that an assessment, there could also be the issuance of an EPC as a side effect, but in that case, in this case, I would really see the building renovation passport as the first information tool that should be provided. Another potential trigger point is when people inherit a building. But again, then shouldn't we rather go for a building renovation passport than for an EPC?
Yeah, this is
an additional comment on my side with regards to coming back to mandatory requirements. What you see now in France is that the EPC is used with classes F and G to define what is energy poverty, which means that the French state is going to implement a ban on this, on the selling or renting of these buildings after a few years, which means that you could also have a kind of European definition of what is energy poverty on an EPC scale, which could be related for the label itself, and then it's up to each country to have the absolute values behind the labels. But if you use the rating of the EPC mandatorily at EU scale to define what is energy poverty, then you can implement national policies to renovate the building stock for this very important part of the building stock. And then, of course, in this context, you need to provide user-friendly full information to the building owner, and that could be, for instance, in the form of a building passport or additional information that you provide also to the owner.
Thanks, Olivier. If I can, no, that's a good point. I mean, the link of with a minimum energy performance standard is definitely a relevant point, because that also triggers EPCs in areas not affected by sale or rent directly. In some cases. If I can move the discussion a little bit towards harmonization, because you've all covered increasing the number of EPCs, but if I could ask you for a few comments on harmonization, I think that would be very good.
I'm happy to react, Paul. You know, it's my deep conviction that this is really needed. If we want to have cheap technology, as cheap as possible in Europe, to in terms of services, but also in the terms of products and technology, to improve the energy performance of our buildings, then we need one market. And what I see now is that different technical solutions are evaluated in a different way in neighboring countries, which includes that industries who are supplying these goods and services, they don't have really an open market, and so it is suboptimal, and I think it is doesn't benefit in this way the open market in the EU. So I think increased harmonization is needed. Of course, we always have to overcome the local issues on the local building regulations, but we are all the same people, so I don't sometimes not understand all those hesitation to harmonize.
Yeah, I totally agree. No, it's is necessary the harmonization of EPCs. There is a clear lack of convergence across European Union because each member state has implemented its own scheme. So we have different energy assessment systems or methodologies. We have different rating systems. We have different reference values. So it's very difficult to compare indicators across the European Union. So this is a difficulty also to the evaluation of the assessment of policies, impact and targets. So yeah, I think it's the reason why we are here and we are developing these projects indeed.
I also wanted to add that I just recently talked to representatives from the financing sector, and they are really extremely interested in having valid certificate on which they can base their financing decisions for renovations. And I mean, and that's from an Austrian financing institute, but Austria is not too large, so they would be interested to not develop it only for the Austrian market, but for larger area or preferably for the whole European Union. So they had really this very strong interest to have a valid certificate across Europe on which they can base their financing decision. But we have to say, I think we even don't have it yet on the national level. A certificate on which they can really base their financing decision. I think that also needs to be said.
Which to me relates to the Article 11.9 of the EPBD about the voluntary certification scheme, because I think that was the idea for the non-residential sector where we have big investment. And since you have real estate companies that are operating worldwide at EU scale or at the world scale and not at country scale, and they want to prioritize their investments from a country to another one, from a building to another one. And here you need comparable ratings of buildings from different countries owned by the same companies or that they might buy. So this is why we need, once again, not an operational, but a European rating of energy performance at EU scale, so that these big investors are able to compare buildings and focus and define their market strategies and then buy and sell strategies, which is what we try to do in the Adrian project for offices and hotels. And since we had discussions with banks in different countries, with European funds and with real estate assessors and real estate companies, they are very interested in this common European rating approach.
Thanks, Olivier.
I can also comment. I think that the need is answered by the fact that most of the projects that are currently that today in the meeting are dealing with the fact that an EU-based approach is required. So a lot of effort is denoted towards that direction, and I think that makes the need and the necessity of the harmonization very clear. And from our end, the Square EPC project, we spent quite a few months in the first 6 months of the project to identify these needs and to work towards the direction of creating something like that. This is why we started the work of in the form of working groups for developing something like that. A common and standardized approach for either asset or operational rating. It's very important, and it's something that needs to be delivered in a European level.
Maybe just to add very quickly on that, I very much agree, and also connecting to what Gerfried Sebrat writes in the chat, in the Extendo project, we have also started to, our colleagues from Vito did it, to have a look which input data is required in different countries to calculate the EPC. And these are, of course, very different, but maybe this can really be, I agree, this can be maybe the starting point to just to see, okay, is it possible to set up such to compare this input data and to find a common format for this input data.
Yeah, we try to do that a little bit in the UserCentered project, where we try to see what input data are used in several countries, but it is quite difficult to compare them because they are sometimes of different nature. Yeah.
Maybe that's also a point where we could connect between the projects.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I just would like to add something about the data and the harmonization. There is in Europe this standards, ISO standards, that we can use for energy performance assessment. But of course, what we think is to let each member state to make its own calculation method. For example, if he use the asset rating. But what we are developing is to have a common data model, not a common calculation method, but a common data model. And if we have this common data model, we can make some additional added value, for example, for checking of the quality of the input data, and to have a common tools to make these inputs available.
Thanks, Raffaella. Sorry, if I could ask you to explain a little bit more, what do you understand by a common data model? It's just to make sure that, sorry, it's just to make sure that I understand it properly.
The data model is a content of different things, but there is a part of data for energy performance calculation, for example. And the idea is to say, okay, there is the ISO standards, then we can have this input data for ISO standards, and this data could be a reference of a part of the data model. But of course, in member states, there are different kinds of softwares, of calculation methods. And the idea is to start with this reference of inputs data coming from ISO standards, and to see how to make simplification according to the energy performance calculation of member states.
Okay, thanks. Thanks a lot, Raffaella. And I'm afraid this brings us to the end of the session in timing wise. Olivier, I don't know if we have any more time.
Well, I fear we should stop now, because I would still like that we have a few minutes to start to lay out, the first steps for the collaboration framework we want to establish between the sister projects. Maybe, well, first, thanks a lot for this extremely interesting session. I think we all appreciated a lot the fact that each project could express its own views and in very collaborative way. So that was really a very appreciated session. Thank you very much for that.
Sorry, if I may just conclude with a couple of comments.
Yeah, for sure.
So as my colleague Serena mentioned before, we are now in the process of the revision. So of course, we encourage you to participate, for example, in the open public consultation, and with any, and if you can also participate in the workshops that we're carrying out, or to reach to your stakeholders, for example. And also, if you want to reach to your national, regional, or even to your European representatives, that could also be a way of participating. To mention that we are currently preparing the impact assessment of the proposal that we're going to put forward. So we need to discuss and present the different measures that we're going to propose in numbers, so to speak. And in this slide, we've identified some of the elements that we think would be very necessary for us. and for which we don't always have the information. So for example, in terms of numbers of EPC, in terms of EPC numbers, EPC coverage, quality of EPCs, how many EPCs are rejected, or how many EPCs are considered not good, or how many are considered good enough. So how many EPCs do you think have triggered renovation, or the identified savings levels in EPCs that are then not necessarily put forward? Any of these elements would be very valuable for us to have information. Bear in mind that member states do not necessarily report to the Commission in terms of EPCs. There is not an obligation to report. So a lot of the times the information available to us is very limited. So any information you have on these elements would be very, very valuable to us. Particularly if you could send it to us in the next month or even less than that, because we need to complete our impact assessment by the beginning of the summer. So we have a very limited time to work on it. Any information that you have would be extremely welcome at this stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And for a very well practical point of view, how should we send these documents, reports, information to you? Through which email address or way?
The agency has our contact details. You can contact us through them, or you can ask for our email to the agency. That's also an option.
Just send it what you have to us. I think it's easier this way. And we can liaise with DGNR on that.
I think that's the easiest way of doing it. You all have contact with your project officer and with your project advisor. It's got a different name now.
Yeah, it changes. It's project manager now.
Oh, it's project manager. Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, if you send it to your project manager, they can make sure that it gets to us. And I cannot express how valuable these kind of inputs are. Actually, before you mentioned that Aldrin was the precursor, I would disagree with that. There were lots of projects related to EPCs with that, and I have to say the way EPC look and work nowadays, a lot of it is because of projects funded back in the day through the Intelligent Energy Europe program. Some of you may not remember that program because it's very old.
Yes, we know we were not the only ones. It's just that we had links with EPC Recast, and it's the same teams, of course.
No, I think Aldrin is the precursor of this current new generation of EPCs. That I fully agree.
And all these projects are extremely complementary because there are so many topics we have to deal with. Okay, well, thank you very much. Maybe I'm asking, is that okay for at least, maybe not attendees if you want to leave, but for panelists or coordinators of projects to stay maybe 10 or 15 minutes? I know it has been a long meeting. Maybe some of you have not eaten yet and you might be hungry. But we have some proposals, and I would like to leave the floor to Andrei so that he explains what could be the next steps to define the collaboration framework for our projects. Please let us know in the chat section if you have issues with the end of the meeting, but if not, let's try to take some time for that.
So sorry, could I just say from my side a very big thank you for all these presentations and the very good input in the discussions. And I will leave the meeting now, but it was really valuable, very good. So thank you.
Thank you for attending.
Indeed. Thank you very, very much, and keep up the good work. And thank you also to the agency for organizing this. Have a nice weekend, everyone. And please, let's stay in touch. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Well, Andrei, the floor is yours.
Yes. So as Olivier said, I'm in between you and lunch, most likely, or you're used to not eating. That's another thing.